So my name is Annie Millar Desmond, and I've lived here at MorningSun for 5 years. 4.5 solidly, 5 years in a perforated way, because when we first got here, we were half living at Occupy Wall Street and half living here, because as we arrived here, that movement was happening. And we first visited MorningSun 8 years ago, so 3 years before we moved here. I'm from California, mainly, and my husband is Ambrose Desmond.
What inspired you guys initially to consider living here? As at the time there was no one here living with Michael and Fern besides their family.
Yeah. I think I was raised by parents who meditated a couple hours a day when I was a kid, and spirituality and love were always the most important thing in my family of origin and for me personally, and was a very earnest kid, like reading books for kids about spirituality. And there was a part of me that wasn't like making plans to be a nun, but a part of me for which that made sense. Just like, if this is the most important thing, then just wanted to give myself to it completely. Like, what is life about other than God and love, and wanted no distraction from that. I wasn't raised in a monastic tradition. I wasn't raised Christian particularly. I was raised sort of more syncretic, New Age, Hindu, a mixture of different things. But it was sort of some deep unnamed feeling within me since I was a child. And I believe Ambrose started feeling that kind of draw when he was fairly young, encountering Plum Village and meeting the monastics and just being so stirred by that living example. When we came to visit Michael and Fern the first time, Ambrose was still holding in his mind, do I want to ordain, or do I want to be a householder? And do I want to get married? Do I want to marry this person, which was me? And I think for me, because I was raised in such a spiritual family, I had felt drawn to develop the parts of me that could interact with the world as it is. In college and as a young person, I did a lot of activism and civil disobedience, and that was a huge focus. And I worked at a labor side law firm that also did human rights, environmental justice work, and thought maybe I'll become a lawyer, and then kind of realized I had been teaching preschool before then, that I needed to do something that wasn't just sort of what lined up with my head's ideals, but also that I'm just such a heart-centered person and I love nurturing, and that was part of my gift, and I needed to follow that. So right after that, I took an internship that then developed into being the director of the programs at this farm-based environmental education center that was residential. Slide Ranch is a couple miles from Green Gulch Zen Center. A couple miles from Wendy Johnston. It's a huge mentor for me in the Plum Village tradition and the gardening activist tradition as well. So I was there for 7.5 years living in community, no septic, sharing a farmhouse kitchen with 20 people, over half of whom I was the supervisor of, and growing a huge amount through being in the fishbowl of community, and through doing something that lined up so much with who I was versus something that lined up with my mental ideals, but that like truly lined up with who I was. And I'd started doing that. It was sort of a leap of faith to be like, okay, I'm gonna not do a salaried job, I'm gonna do an internship. And then it actually did become a solid situation through following my heart that way. Part of it was the idea that you are the 5 people you spend the most time with. And who did we want to spend time with? Living in community with Michael and Fern as they were raising their family, and with Candace, Fern's mom, and Sarah, and the people who would come, including the people who were already coming for Days of Mindfulness. Felt like we'd be learning a lot, and it would be support for us to... I never had any fear that spirituality would not be central at any point in my life, but sort of figuring out some of the logistics of how to integrate spirituality as much as possible as an experiment. How can you be a parent and give as much focus as is possible to your spiritual practice? So we visited over 3 years in every season. And and Michael and Fern asked us to come out, and we were they had asked us to be on the board already even before we made that decision. So it was very lovely to be part of MorningSun's process regardless. And then we came out here to try it out. Pretty clear we were going to move here, but well, we spent at least half a year here, if you include Occupy, like 9 months here, before we were totally clear that this is where we wanted to be. And part of the clarity, I mean, I think the biggest clarity was working with Michael and Fern. So we would meet pretty much every day in the morning, and it was just a really magical collection of conditions informing all 4 of us, and Candace too as the 5th person, and John Young was here too at different times near the beginning, of a former monastic who was lovely and wonderful to have him here while he was here. Just really special conditions all coming together. I think we all work really well together in a cooperativistic way, which is unusual in our culture. Like most, the conditions of our culture don't support those skills of working together in a informal cooperativistic versus kind of more structured authoritarian role-based way. So I think the process of learning from each other and seeing that we were able to we were all able to take each other in, and integrate the different life experiences that we each had, because we all had such amazing community living experience. And I experienced just this beautiful combination of freshness and experimental exuberance, sort of the classic entrepreneurial spirit with also groundedness. And I think that intentional living in community, like in an explicit community where you live together, is actually, there's both more psychological support and certainly spiritual support here. And it's more challenging than just living in a neighborhood. Because, just making sure that there's that sort of, oh yes, this is beautiful and transcendent and so special and magical, and we're all still ourselves, like everybody. And we have all of these supports reminding us to go into our practice, and we all have compost and beautiful flowers and just the whole thing. And getting to, having a sense of that, and then by spending some time here, getting to taste that before saying like, yes, I know what this is. I know that it's beautiful and full of possibilities, and I know it won't save me, and it won't be perfect, because it is the earth. It's a beautiful experiment with many wonderful conditions. But
Have you seen much transformation in your own life in the past 4.5 years that you've been here, or do you have any maybe examples or stories or anything you'd like to share about the impact that it's had on you?
More of what I experienced, a deeper level of what I experienced at the monasteries too, where there's like a brilliant, radiant nun who's singing what seems like the most simple of songs and using hand motions, a song that a child could relate to. And there's no irony, and there's no distance, and there's no embarrassment. There's like, there's a comfortability with being present with the simplest things in life. And I think we all have that sense somewhere in us, but especially in our generation, I think we're afraid to be simple. We're afraid to just love. We're afraid we'll be called unaware or Pollyanna-like or unsophisticated. And Thai models that so brilliantly. I mean, I guess all the spiritual teachers do in a way, but he's a living master we have right here, and that you see the spirit in the monastics that work with him, and I experienced that so strongly. I mean, for me personally, I'm being close to Fern, and I think most people experience that with her. Just this unapologetic love. And so I noticed that when I would go back to San Francisco and go to a dinner party where people were being very witty, but also hedging, like no one wants to commit to fully accepting anything or celebrating anything because they could get criticized for that, I was just able, just as an example, but many settings, especially going into cities, just being able to really feel that hedging, that distance, was just a lack of safety in people's bodies, and that the source of my safety wasn't going to come from playing that same game, because that would just reinforce it. I have that game in me, I have those instincts in me also, but just, being my own anchor and trusting that that's all I need to do, that's all I need to be is simple and in my body, and knowing that also has the potential to be a touchstone for the people around me. So it's not like I'm trying to change them or anything like that. It doesn't matter whether they notice it, whether it impacts them or not, but it's an offering, it's we all are Sangha, and so that when I felt that lack of safety in somebody else's body, that was like, that I knew it was there because I would stop breathing as deeply, that was the time to breathe deeply, not to join them in that. So that was really opposite training of what I had developed since the age of 18. And so that there is that, and I this is true within our whole tradition, and I really feel it here so potently at MorningSun, that there's both the let's be with what truly is, but in a way where we're not going outside of our bodies to feel the truth. We're staying right with our bodies, which is maybe another way for saying we love ourselves, and we care for our safety.
What do you love the most about MorningSun?
Well, what just came up when you said that was watching my son grow up with the children that are here and the adults that are here. I love, I love that there's room for creativity here. There's really an excitement about people bringing their experience to contribute to MorningSun, and really a sense of a collaborative, that people here love collaboration, you know, so it's it feels like a good mixture where it's not just like any new idea that comes along, it'll just go off in this direction and become, you know, sort of lose its grounding, but that there's like sort of a general orientation of openness and of recognizing when there's something that could benefit, and of being sort of laid on its feet as an organization and as a culture. I mean, for me personally, I was unexpectedly diagnosed with advanced cancer not quite a year and a half ago while living here, and I would go to the days of mindfulness every week. Everyone we have a kid, so everyone would prioritize that I would be able to go, that Finn would be cared for. And yeah, I had a friend who visited and said that once she sat in the meditation hall during a day of mindfulness, she was able to understand the letters that I was sending her that hadn't made sense before. I think before this diagnosis, this would happen sometimes and other times not. But entering into that terrifying and beautiful crisis, every day of mindfulness I went to, so much would shift within me, that so much, you know, it's a surprise to hold hands with your mortality in your 30s for most of us these days, if we've been healthy. And you know, there's not a ton of things that prepare us necessarily for that moment, and there were a lot of things that prepared me, but there still was and is so much to process. And yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's just like such a bright light to be able to practice my experience this last year and a half. It's sort of, in a way, you could see it as like falling and then finding, and then falling and finding, and falling and finding. I think it's important to fall apart, like probably always, and certainly in crisis, and when we're in steep learning curves and experiencing, a lot of physical pain. I was going through chemotherapy and surgeries, and so the ability to just like offer myself to the altar of the Sangha. And see what came forward, and it was like always jewels that I had no idea what would appear until I was in the meditation hall. So it's like, sort of having like a longer and longer necklace of jewels supporting me. It's interesting. I've had the experience. I don't get a chance to write too often because I'm focused on being present with Finn a lot and being in the present moment. But I love writing about this experience of practicing with I don't even know what words to use, but I'll just say practicing with cancer. And I've had the experience of a lot of people, including people I barely know, saying that it's reading about how Morning Sun and my practice, which is supported here, has been a raft for me. How supportive it's been to them, just witnessing that. I think that a big part of being a monastic, in my view, is practicing with death and life, and the 5 remembrances, and we are of the nature to grow old, or maybe not grow old, but we're of the nature to get sick, and we're of the nature to die. And that monastics do that to live their life in the most beautiful way. So being in a culture that supports that aspiration in me as I'm going through such a direct practice with 5 remembrances, to experience the gift of proximity to mortality. I'm not alone in being aware of the gift that is, and I'm around people who have some degree of sense of it, through practice, if not through their own life experiences. So it's sort of, it's like paradoxical, right? It's like the last thing I want is to have cancer, where the likelihood is that I won't be on the planet for a lot longer. And it's also like, this is like the essence of life, is living with the awareness of the preciousness of it, and that it's a gift. It's hard to feel when you're relatively young and have been blessed in a lot of ways. And it's really a gift. I mean, so I've been really supported living here in experiencing the practice of cancer as an experience that's the best of times and the worst of times. And yeah, just letting all of that be, letting, not being attached to that I shouldn't be under the wave when I am under the wave, and also knowing, I'll be up at the top of it again, and then I'll go back down, just letting it. It's a very sacred time of life. I'm not being given 3 months to live. I'm not being told go to the hospice. It's not a situation like that. But I think a lot of people, even I was diagnosed with already advanced cancer, but even people where it's very early stage, there is a feeling of that, of like whatever people choose to do with it, whatever their practices and whatever feels helpful to them with all the conditions in their lives, there is some experience of one's mortality. And yeah, I kind of love that. It's like I don't want the circumstances surrounding it, but it's kind of like the 5 remembrances are just like, hi, we're embodied and we're here to like support you experiencing life. Yeah, so it's sort of like not such a usual perspective in a way in our culture. So being here, it's like really that's reflected back to me. That's held and supported, and
is there any last thing you'd like to share about people who are exploring communities, or maybe thinking about exploring Morning Sun or other mindfulness-based practice communities? Or those who are thinking about visiting here? Any last words you'd like to share about your home, Morning Sun Community?
It's in a really exciting moment, Morning Sun. There's just sort of a critical mass of really committed practitioners who are deeply grateful to be here and have a lot to give, just very naturally from their hearts, and there's also I think it's a very young at heart community, and there's people who live here who are in their 70s, and I include everyone in that. So it's just a sweet time of feeling it manifesting more, but also still with this kind of youthful energy that's part of why we came here in the first place. And I don't mean youthful like in a way that it doesn't include people who are older, but sort of an eternal freshness, and just like elemental sense of wonder, and creativity and dynamism, so it's really sweet because I think we were drawn here, Ambrose and I, to be part of the pioneer phase of, but because we were excited to be here for that and how delicious that has been, and also because we were so excited for where it was going, of feeling just like more embodied as a community and just more personalities to grow from and learn from, and more battery cells to recharge each other and bring different perspectives and gifts. And so yeah, I think it's just like a really exciting time, and I would encourage people who are interested in community to come to MorningSun if that feels right and they feel drawn to it, and to come to whatever community they come to with just like a gentle, curious, open heart.
Yeah, you can't separate you from MorningSun, as you are so instrumental in the pioneer stage. And so that's why that question feels even more alive to me to ask you, is what do you envision for it? Because you've been planting those seeds of visioning for so many years in such a critical time, and I want to hear about what your vision has been, because that I'm sure that what the vision that you've had will continue to grow.
So for me, being a place of retreat for activists and people who are doing particularly for activists, but activists come in so many forms: teachers and social workers and all sorts of helping professions, a place where people can take a breath and connect to the deep reasons that they're doing the work that they're doing, because I think we need community. Like, we are herd animals, we're not separate. We don't operate that way, like biologically, we don't. And so having an experience of people around us who are helping us cultivate our deepest ideals and reflecting those to us, and having an experience of spaciousness, that combination of spaciousness for ourselves and people around us that are engaging those deep parts of ourselves. So being sort of a retreat grounds for people to then go out into the world and be under duress in some way, but carry that sense of Sangha with them as they're experiencing, sort of violence, broadly speaking, out in the world, to carry that sense of retreat, to be able to retreat here and then carry that with them as they're on the front lines, as they're being warriors in all the ways that we are.